Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets are eliminated in the semifinals of the NBA Summer League, but Jalen Wilson continues his assault on the court. While on the other end of the spectrum, Noah Clowney does seem to be struggling as a young NBA prospect. We dive in on their performances and our overall takeaways from the summer coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends. It is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets. Every single day over there, you're going to find Doug Norrie. He's the owner-operator of DFSR for all your daily fantasy sports rankings from DraftKings to FanDuel. He's got you covered. I'm Adam Arbrecht, breaking down the New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast. My boy, Andy Mack. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free on all those great platforms, and let you know, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com. Promo code Locked On. And Doug, the kiss of death came over on Twitter when I said Brooklyn Nets are headed to the finals would be poetic justice. Unfortunately, the nail in the coffin against the Cavs here in the Summer League.
Yeah, look, it was a really cool game. Ultimately, it ended in overtime with the Elam ending, and it looked like the Nets were going to be eliminated well before, early into that.
Yeah,
kind of staged for the Elam for the target score ending. They staged what amounts to a pretty cool comeback, right? Like to the point where it took a sort of a random shot in the lane. It was basically down to the next basket wins, which is really all you can ask for. Really, really some cool moments. Ultimately, for me, at this point, when you're rooting for Summer League, you're kind of just rooting for good basketball. And I actually thought that was the case. It was good, exciting basketball for the second half, especially. And sucks to see the Nets go. And we know in the end, you don't hang these banners anywhere. So whatever. But ultimately, for a Sunday afternoon, I don't know. I thought the basketball was really, really, really exciting.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about, as we said at the top there, talk about Jalen Wilson, his consistent performances, get into Noah Clowney and what has been a struggle for him as a very young player in the Summer League. But to your point, man, the Nets, by the way, now that their Summer League journey is over, were a team that seemed to be a little slow moving early in games, and then consistently game over game would come out in second halves, put on comebacks, put on big shooting performances, have guys that really stepped up in it. But man, to your point, in the late sequences of the fourth quarter and overtime for this game, don't tell these players that they're not going to raise a banner if you take home the Summer League, right? Because all it is, when you have guys, they're all competing for G League, they're competing for NBA contracts, they're competing for their professional lives, right? You put a ball in front of them, it is all out, taking charges in the lane, right? Going the other way in late game sequences. From that standpoint, that's really all you have to show me, like the effort, the energy in these games. I go, I'm invested. Like, let's go. This matters as much as anything I'm going to watch right now.
And the difference between this Summer League performance, and we'll get to some of these individual guys here shortly, but the difference between, I thought, this Summer League performance and let's say the last two for the Nets, which were highlighted by Cam Thomas scoring on every basket. And that was fun, right? It's like fun to watch really one guy excel. And Cam was awesome for two straight Summer Leagues. He was massively high usage, and he's a bucket getter in those kinds of situations. So that was fun. These 5 games for the Nets have been something totally different. They were much more team oriented. They were, and I'm not knocking Cam. I'm just saying there was definitive differences in like watching these games as opposed to watching the other ones. But these were like team performances. There were a few standouts, but like there were guys that kind of stepped up every single game. They did look sort of like a cohesive unit at times, which I thought was cool, even though, we know that a lot of these guys aren't going to continue on with the big club, but it did feel like a team effort for like a thing in Summer League, which can also often be just around the individual efforts, right? Everyone's fighting for their lives. The high round draft picks are going to be given the green light to just do whatever they want, right? So this didn't have that feel from the Nets, just from the Nets team overall. And I really appreciate it. And I get why sometimes it should. These should be highlights for future stars, 100%. I would never say you shouldn't. Like the Jabari Smith shows were awesome. But because the Nets don't really have any of those guys, I appreciated what they did put out in terms of a team effort.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. And on that note, you did a great solo episode talking about Jalen Wilson already. But as it is the cap off here, we won't go away from this game without highlighting the fact that he did it again. All of the
Yeah.
consistency that you wanted from him. And what I actually like about it when you look back at it, first of all, that he played 37 minutes in this game. How about that? But also, he was 4 of 13 from beyond the arc, 2 of 6 from deep, had a couple of nice 3-pointers in the first half of this game. When you watch the second half of this one, what I really liked is that he seems to have the NBA level mentality. And to your point about team play, what do I need to do as the game evolves? Early on, it is about, can I get my own bucket? Can I create my own shot? Had some nice moments of facilitation, 4 assists in this game. He ends up getting to the line 14 times by the time this is done. And I thought there was a really nice shift from him in the second half of saying, again, creating for others, being on the perimeter, and then putting my head down, putting my shoulder down, getting into the lane, drawing contact. He just has a ton of, we said this before, but a ton of NBA ready type of mentality and instincts to his game that you expect when he is a player that is obviously older coming out of college.
And that's the point, right? The age is the key here, because when you are 22 years old coming out of college, you kind of have to show out in the summer league to even have a chance. Right?
Yeah, you don't get to look raw, right?
Exactly, right. Like, we'll get to a guy that's looked like, the skills maybe have some time to develop, are going to need some time to develop. Like, when you're this age, you have to sort of be among the best guys to even get a taste later, because it's just not going to be there. It's all these guys. He already, and JJ Redick made a great point about this during the podcast, or sorry, during the broadcast, that a lot of these guys just get dumpstered just because of age. Like, it doesn't actually have, like, in the draft, it has very little to do with the on-court talent. It has more to do with just like the age curve is just far beyond these other guys, and you're feeling like you're too close to your peak and it's not good enough yet or whatever. So the fact that he's 22, he had to, for his own personal, just like staying in the league thing, kind of had to show out here a little bit. And he did. Like, he did everything. He checked, from a summer league's perspective, checked every single box. Body control was really, really good. On-court decision-making was really good. Defensive positioning was really, really good. And like, I think from those standpoints, you leave Vegas, at least for him, with no questions about whether he should be, the chance at the next level should come. Right?
Yeah.
Now, is he going to be a start? No, probably not. But there's no doubt now that at least he deserves a chance going to the next level. You can't, and believe me, when you leave summer league, you can't say that about every guy.
Before we do move into Noah Clowney here, coming up in the next segment, I had this thought after watching Jalen Wilson over the course of it, and his age. He is 22 years old coming out. If the Nets had taken him 21st overall in this NBA draft with his age, would you come out of this summer league feeling as high about him, right? Is his performance good enough that you'd say, yeah, you're on the older side. We know what we took in the 20s of the NBA draft, but this is why we took you. Because it's like, I can make a case that he's as on par or more NBA ready than a lot of guys that were taken in the first round. There's a reason for that, but I don't know if his age should have been as detrimental to his draft stock as it clearly was, right? I do know it shouldn't have been, because some team is going to turn around here in a few years and say, well, we didn't get anything out of the 20-year-old we took at 26 or 27 in the NBA draft. And at least you know what the floor reasonably was going to be for Jalen Wilson.
Yeah, these are always funny, because like, what's the definition of success? It's like, it's expectations over performance, or performance over expectations, or something, whatever the math ends up being, right? Because it's like, it's not good enough to just be good. Sometimes it's good. You need to be good relative to what the expectation levels were. And there's a gajillion examples of this from the NBA level that we could give. Like, Andrew Wiggins is, I think, like the perfect example. It's like, did he ever meet the number 1 overall draft pick? No. Was he a key, a must have for a championship team? Yeah. Like, so what is it? Like, where do we land? So I'm just picking a random guy. There's so many examples, but for him, for sure, the expectation levels would have been different had he been 30 slots higher in the draft. No doubt about it. And I actually know at the time during the draft, we would have probably, if I'm just being honest, would have had problems with the Nets drafting a guy like that much older. Forget about even the mocks, which it would have looked, 30 spots too high. But like,
would look odd.
Right, exactly. But just, we would have said, oh, this is Marks is going for age here and over upside, and we would have just had those conversations. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
no, I think so. And actually, coming up here in a second, we're going to talk about the incredibly young player that the Brooklyn Nets did take at 21 in Noah Clowney, how he has struggled in this summer league. And it's actually the perfect comparison, taking age over the prospect, the potential. What is the right path to go? And I'll lay out a scenario that I think could turn Doug's mind around.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Prize Picks figured this out when you're into the daily fantasy. You don't want to be wrestling with salary caps. You don't want to be going up against sharks in the water. All you're doing on Prize Picks is you're going against their player projections, and you're just going more or less. And by the way, they got this slice and dice every single way you can think about it. They got summer league stuff up there. I'm looking at the Prize Picks projections right now. They got like Dominic Barlow's up there, Michael DeVoe. This is how AJ Lawson, Kobe Brown. This is how finally they're figuring this out. And then you get over there with baseball if you want home runs, strikeouts, singles, doubles, triples, stolen bases. Prize Picks has figured all this stuff out to make it really easy and make it really fun. You have to head over to Prize Picks right now. All you do, pick 2 to 6 players. You figure out if they're going to score more or less in their Prize Picks projections. You can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. Like I said before, you're not competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit 100, Prize Picks will give you 100. Deposit 50, Prize Picks will give you 50. You can figure out all the other iterations. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy.
Okay, so now we turn our attention to the other player, the first-round pick, the high upside guy, at least through the eyes of the Brooklyn Nets, and that's one Noah Clowney. And I said it there at the end of the first segment. When you think about Jalen Wilson's age, but you know what the floor is, and you know he's close to being an NBA-ready guy, I think the scenario where the Nets traded back from one of those picks, as we kind of talked about leading up to the draft, and then maybe at the back end of the first round, you're taking a guy like Jalen Wilson because you believe in him. I probably could have wrapped my head around that. You hit it correctly that both you and I would have been scratching our heads had they in the moment taken Jalen Wilson at 21. However, you and I, we understood that the Nets were likely been talked about, rumored to take a player like Noah Clowney at 21. But even at the time, you said, how high were other teams on him? How many other teams would have taken him at 21 or 22 if they had those draft picks? So far in Summer League, I understand he's young and the prospect is there. But I can probably find 5 or 6 or 10 guys from 20 to 21 years old that you got to convince me that Noah Clowney is going to be exponentially better 2 years from now than any of these guys are going to be. Because 15 years from now, we're not going to look back and think about, oh, well, that's why you waited those extra 2 years at the start of this player's career because he turned into X.
Yeah, this one's tough. He's super young. We knew he was really raw coming into the draft. He was not really a consensus pick at this point, but there was where he was drafted. But there was guys like Locked On's Josh Lloyd we got into it over the weekend, and Josh had him like way higher, like he had him middle of the lottery, right? So it's not like this was off of everyone's board. It was not the guy that you and I thought should be the pick at that point, but I could definitely see it. What you're hoping from a situation like this is that they come in and show you sort of like glimpses of things, even if the whole package is not there, which is fine. These guys do not have to be finished products when you're 18 years old, right? Clowney is super, super young. I totally get it. And he has measurables that are impossible to replicate, right? In terms of just length and wingspan and athleticism and stuff like that. The disappointing part is that, like I said, he's like, you're hoping to see flashes of stuff here that you can sort of build on. I don't know if Summer League gave us a ton to really hold on to. The shooting wasn't there. I mean, I like the willingness to shoot. I think that was good. Like he did get up threes in Summer League. He averaged, more than about 4.25 a game, only shot 20% from beyond the arc, was effectively benched in this game, like got into foul trouble really early, ended up only playing 7 minutes. That could be a feature, not a bug. If they were kind of just, maybe that was part of the plan, was he wasn't going to run that much. I don't really know. It's a little conspicuous because of the foul trouble and just not play. But I mean, it's not like panic button time or anything here on him. But like when you're taking in the 20s, which is still sort of a high pick, right? Like it's just outside the lottery. You are hoping to see a few more glimpses than I think we saw. And I think that this Summer League, whether it was the speed, whether it was just the overall acumen, whether it was just that his talent are going to need much more time to mature, it's hard to look at the summer league and take a ton away with you in terms of like what Clowney is going to become, with the understanding that he has a lot of time to become something.
Yeah. There's no, mentioned there. There's no reason to be concerned about the pick and what he's going to turn into. It's been 5 games.
I mean, I think there's a little concern here. Like I'll say this. I'm not going to just totally. You can say you don't. Sorry to cut you off. I want to say.
No.
I think it is okay to be a little concerned. Like 5 games here, and it looked bad. Just put it. It looked bad. Like so, there was times I thought I think he did the right things on defense. You saw some of the shot blocking potential. I think you did see glimmers of it, but you really had to look. You had to squint to see it, and that's more. I'm definitely not coming out here and be like it's all good. He didn't show you anything like that, but. So I'm really not trying to sugarcoat it. It was a bad summer league performance for him.
No, you framed it the right way. It's not time. There's no reason to panic. It's okay to have a concern, right? And I think when you look at guys that you take in that range in the 20s of the NBA draft, to your point, like, and you mentioned some of those key things. He moved had some nice footwork with Mobley defensively, stayed in front of him, deflected the shot, picked up another assignment on Bates, took him to all the way to the basket, was able to stay in front of him, get the block. There's moments here that look nice, but in totality, you would not add those up and say, hey, here's all the seeds of success. And that includes, to your point, not only the perimeter shooting, which the willingness to shoot is a good thing, the percentage is a bad thing, because then I can go and point at plenty of guys that never put up 3-point attempts. And when they rarely do, they hit about 20% of them, right? Like that percentage, at least out of summer league, is not high enough to say, oh, there's a thing to grow off of this as well. But then more than that was what you mentioned there in passing. He got effectively benched in this summer league game. And while his road is long, I at least would have liked to have seen that he was consistently a part of the rotations in this summer league, because that speaks to what's going to happen in potentially whatever his role is going to be this season, next season. How are the Nets going to develop him? How are they going to find opportunities to develop him? All of those things play a factor here. And while he is the 19-year-old first-round draft pick for the Brooklyn Nets, they also have other young guys that they're looking at and developing. And you'd hate to think that something suffers because of what he needs to continue to work on and develop. I don't know. It's just interesting to me. I'm going to be fascinated to see how the summer goes for him, how he looks as you get to the NBA season, how he looks over the course of this NBA season. That's not about active minutes at the NBA level. It's just, what do we hear about him? What are the drips and drabs that we learn about him? And a lot of this speaks to the Nets coaching staff and going that very developmental direction. This is a guy that needs to develop. So, it can all work out, but I would have liked to see more positives, I guess, would be my takeaway out of summer league than what we got, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think what this probably solidifies, at least in the short term, is this is going to be a lot of minutes in Long Island, and that's going to be it. And like the other guys they brought in, and we'll talk roster spots here shortly, and then we got some other. We'll talk Darius Baisley later in the week. Like we got some other stuff to talk about. They brought in some other wings, and they have wing depth, and like they're just not going to need his minutes at all. And I think there's just not any pressure on him to like come and perform at the NBA level now. And I think that was always part of it as well, right? It's like we already knew this. Like we knew he was a super raw prospect that was probably going to take a year or two more than some of the other guys, because he's younger than a lot of these other guys. He's just on a different age curve than most other dudes. And so I don't think this summer league probably didn't affect what was already the plan, which was going to be him playing a lot in Long Island, right? Like that's just going to be kind of it.
Coming up here in a second, let's talk about, as the summer league has come to a conclusion, where the Nets currently stand. 2 two-way contracts filled, 1 roster spot available. What did we learn, if anything, on a handful of key players, including the man that effectively took Noah Clowney's minutes, Raekwon Gray? We'll get into that in a second. Okay, so when we look at the roster, we mentioned Jalen Wilson. They gave him the 2-way very early. Everything about summer league indicates that's exactly what you're supposed to do with a player like that. Raekwon Gray, my encapsulation of my experience watching him in this summer league was incredibly inconsistent, but of the inconsistent times, there are some consistent moments that make you think, oh, this is what you want to do. And by the way, in this game specifically, I did like the fact that there was some switching assignments defensively where he was able to get out on perimeter shooters on smaller matchups and hold his own from a footwork standpoint. Like I said this early in summer league as well. he has shown the little things over a couple of seasons where you go, oh, I get what the Nets see in this. I get why they want this to work out. Do you look at him and see anything that like justifies the two-way contract? Are you out on him? Do you not understand it? Because I think that's really the big pressing question, because he has it. And that was at least surprising coming into Summer League, thinking there's a handful of guys that should be up for this open competition. And he has been cemented seemingly by the Brooklyn Nets in that role.
I've just never really gotten it. And I mean, he signed the two-way at the end of last year, and I'm just not positive that is he definitely carried it into this year. Like I'm unsure about that. I'm pretty sure he already has it, but I'll just clarify that, I guess, as we go. But just that's really actually neither here nor there for this next comment, because I have never really seen it, and I've never totally gotten it, and he's kind of old now, and I just like don't even know like what the hope here is. And I hate saying stuff like this sometimes because these guys are young, and I know these are like sort of career makers, and like I just don't think it's a good, I don't know, I feel bad sometimes because I'm like, these guys are like, this is the this is the difference between life-changing money. Not like I'm making the decisions or anything, but I personally for Raekwon have not really seen it. I don't really know what he would do at the NBA level. He's like too small to guard fives, and he's too slow to guard threes or fours, and like he doesn't shoot the ball well enough to really kind of get you excited there. And it's not like he just like jumps off the page with athleticism. I just don't really know what it is that you're hoping to happen here. So for me, it's just sort of a head scratcher. I don't really know what like the organization would think is the upside on it, right? I'm not even sure what the floor is. like even the floor seems too low. And so just because I don't think he does any one thing particularly well, and on the NBA level. So for me, it's just kind of confusing. And I don't think he's a threat to like take anyone's minutes or anything here. But at this point, for me, even taking a sort of a developmental slot on the roster really sort of would be confusing, because I just haven't seen it in the limited opportunities, or even more than limited opportunity he's been given. Even in Summer League, it doesn't really pop. And I know this was easily his best Summer League game, but I just think that, I don't know, it just nothing really pops off the page for me. And I just don't think that that's really going to change based on what we've seen so far.
And to your point, he's 3 months older than David Duke Jr., a player that has had his time in the NBA, that has certainly, had his moments and opportunities to showcase what he is, and has proven or disproven what the ability he's going to have a role. So if you just think about guys in that age range, right? Raekwon Gray has yet to be able to even give the sample size of the NBA level where we can start to analyze it, right? When we've done with David Duke Jr. Yeah, he does a lot of things well when it's the Summer League, when it's the G League, but when it comes to NBA level, there's something just missing there. Gray hasn't even gotten to the place where you could examine that. And then I think, just to your point, in this game, by the way, and we're going to talk about it as this week unfolds and things come out around the Brooklyn Nets and the decisions they're going to make. When you see a guy, this isn't one for one positionally, but like when Armani Brooks is hitting clutch buckets late in the fourth quarter and in overtime, and you think about what the Nets might need at the NBA level, it's just, that's where your eye gravitates, right? To some guys that just seem to be able to do it. And also, by the way, have some of that NBA level experience on their ledger. And inside of this roster, because I was just looking it over now, guys that didn't really, even, by the way, Armani Brooks, also older considerably than Raekwon Gray and David Duke Jr. And that's fine. But it's just, I don't know what other guy, because actually Kennedy Chandler to me struggled a little bit in this game to put that same level of consistency. I think all the concerns you would have about him. We can close out just on this thought, or not close out, but as far as these young guys go, where would you go with this roster? When you look at it having one roster spot, seemingly, and we'll talk about this throughout this week, seemingly the waiting game on the Miami trade and maybe the Tyler here, right? There's things that could happen here that impact when the Nets can make decisions. But I only really have one guy that jumps out from an age and developmental standpoint here that fits the timeline for the Brooklyn Nets. Because it's kind of funny, man. A lot of these guys are older than you realize. Like, a lot of these guys are 98s. Mid 1998s. That makes them well beyond the trajectory of developing. They're G League minute eaters for you, which is important, But there's not a lot of guys you look here at a summer league and go, oh, maybe he could be a guy that comes up here. And there's a difference between short-term value versus long-term impact.
Yeah, I think this is sort of the problem with the way, not problem. This is like sort of what's funny about this summer league is that I think the overall summer league experience has been fun from like being a Nets fan. They won some games, they played hard, the team cohesiveness seemed cool, the energy seemed cool. I don't know if you walk out of this summer league outside of Jalen and think, you're all that excited about like the prospects of these guys making big differences on the NBA level. I don't think that's there. That's just me. Like we've sort of already seen what David Duke Jr. can do. I think he's fine to get another contract. I think he played well. I think Armani Brooks has shown, at least at the NBA level, that he can shoot. I mean, it struggles to do a ton else, but at least he can do that to seemingly at a really high level. I don't think you saw nearly enough from Kennedy Chandler to really kind of like go nuts about it, because even though believe me, we desperately wanted to, because like athleticism, speed, all this other stuff, there was like a hope that I think he was going to really pop off the page. It didn't happen. The shooting was, again, a huge struggle. So I just don't know. And yeah, 5 for 16 in this game. I just don't know what you really saw from this that makes you feel like these guys are just going to pop when it comes to, actually playing against the real competition. It was kind of a lot of, frankly, for me, the summer league, as fun as it was to watch, confirmed sort of what I already kind of suspected around most of these guys, right? Most of them did the thing that I thought was going to happen. It was like Chandler's going to show you minutes and the shooting's going to be inconsistent. That's what he's always done. Clowney's super raw. Okay, that's exactly how that worked out, right? Like Armani Brooks, I don't know, whatever. I wouldn't say I went into that with tons of preformed opinions. David Duke Jr., I felt like he was going to probably play pretty well because he has played pretty well here, right? So like I don't know what's really different.
And by the way, on David Duke Jr., it's funny. He would be the guy, if you were picking a guy out of this group, you'd say maybe he should be the guy that gets that last potential if Raekwon Gray stays on the two-way, retains the two-way long. Oh yeah, David Duke Jr., even despite the age, because whatever. But they're at the threshold, as is he, where he doesn't want a two-way contract. Like this guy either wants to be on an NBA roster with the Brooklyn Nets or taking his chances elsewhere. I mean, I think there's a real world, by the way, for some of these guys, Armani Brooks or maybe and a David Duke Jr., with their age, with where they are in their NBA careers. This is where overseas start to come into play for these guys. You can go somewhere else and play real minutes and maybe continue to build your career. Tons of NBA players do that when you're kind of in between the back end of a roster and you're starting to age out of having NBA teams look at you and say, no, we can keep developing this guy. You don't want to be doing that. And they don't want to be, quote, wasting time on a player like that. That's why I'll tell you right now, because I like to put my flag in the ground on something, Doug. And I'm saying this is really soft soil, and I can take it back out if I want to. The only guy, and I said this at the start of Summer League, and I get to say it again now because he played 16 minutes, went 3 of 6, 2 of 4 from beyond the arc, and gave you 4 rebounds. That's Jordan Hall. And it's because he fits the right criteria. He's born in 2002, which makes him young. He is a guy that is in the Kennedy Chandler age range. He's a guy that is going to be 2 years younger right now than a Jalen Wilson, born in 2000. So if I'm going to take a look at a player, it's a guy who was with the Austin Spurs, G League for the San Antonio Spurs last year, hit 35% from deep. He's a guard-forward combo. He has some length. If I'm giving out a two-way contract that I think has any value for what the Nets are currently doing, I'm serving both purposes. Watch yourself on YouTube, Doug, almost. He's fine.
I set my shoulder on that. I set my elbow. I wasn't falling. I set my elbow on the.
I wasn't falling. By the way, I wasn't concerned about you falling asleep until you. Just to be clear, I wasn't dozing off on Adam's statement about Jordan Hall. He fits the right age range. You could see him having some two-way value. Everybody else that we talk about, it's either you already kind of know what they are, or they're already getting too old, right? And that's not me like championing Jordan Hall as being like this great developmental player that could be something, but he does some things right. He has a little bit of size, and he showed something here at Summer League. So give the young guy the two-way contract, because giving it to dudes that are already 22, 23, 24 years old, you're half a season away from wasting an opportunity to continue to explore something. So that's the only guy. That's the guy that would jump out to me, and I'd say, hey, why not? What's the worst case scenario? You end up rescinding it at some point.
Yeah, and the one pushback I would give to that is to say, I know what you said, like David Duke Jr. Is that these other guys in the break glass in case of emergency can play at the NBA level. And like for a few games, like Armani Brooks and David Duke Jr. can do that. It's not going to be amazing, but they can do it, right? So like that's like the one difference in like what you're sort of looking for. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying there's like two types of players, because sometimes you want to have a guy's like, hey, if it really gets crazy on us here with injuries, like we at that point having a guy that can just at least tread water here might be better than shooting the moon on some upside. But it's just. Yeah. Anyway. All right. But we're going to talk. Go ahead. And then we'll finish off.
We're going to talk about Bazley being signed, which is what Doug was going to attention. But also the other thing too, coming up in this week, we're going to get back into minutes breakdowns here, because Jalen Wilson and how he's performed in the summer league and what it could mean for him on the two-way going into the season. I have a very intriguing question when it comes to one Cam Thomas, and if we start to break down the hierarchy of minutes on the Brooklyn Nets. So we have that coming up. We have Bazley. There's still a speculation around Tyler Hero. Big jam-packed week still ahead for us. Anything else we're going to do, Doug?
Oh man, I gave Cam Thomas a pretty low minute projection in my my one before, and people were not happy about that. So maybe we can do round 2 on that one, because people were flummoxed by this one. But I think it's a good exercise. Yeah. So we'll talk a little Darius Bazley. We'll talk minutes. Got a pretty cool guest coming on later in the week. One of the bigger voices in Nets world right now. So pretty excited about that one. So a ton coming up here over the course of this week as Summer League finishes. Make sure you are subscribed to both YouTube and the podcast to make sure you're getting wherever we're throwing out content. Locked On Nets over on YouTube, Locked On Nets over wherever you listen to podcasts.
The old nature versus nurture conundrum. Personally, I believe that a man, no matter where he comes from, chooses his own path. That's Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets World.
Oh, Mr. Feeney, one of the RIP, I think.
No. Still kicking.
Still alive?
Is he really? 99 and living.
That guy's gonna be like 120. The guy was old in the 90s. Like, how old is he now? Oh my God. All right. Well, with that, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.